You could do this. Turn the camera around.
One go-togasm with a virility boost. Good luck with that.
I'm watching The Good Wife. It is not
I know
porn.
who you are.
Okay, and it's not.
Take a heartbeat, pretend you want to date me. I help you with that.
What I watch to go to sleep at night. She's a strong, powerful lawyer.
Yes. Okay, so welcome, public. That's how we start off our meetings now, with a smile. Good morning and welcome to the Thursday, November 14th workshop for the Lee County School Board. We are going to, it is 9:02. We started at 9:01 with The Good Wife, so that's okay. Anyway, we are going to cover RSM and update. Gender review, we'll take a break for 10 minutes. Academic services, we'll talk about Envision 2030, strategic plan, and then our school board attorney will talk about a model for our attorneys in-house and out. And then good of the order and our board comments. So we are all set to go, and some board members are coming in, but let's go ahead and begin with RSM. And gentlemen, if you can take the podium, introduce who you are, give your names for the record.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ernie Almonte. I'm a partner at RSM, and this is Matthew Blundell, also a member of RSM. And thank you for the opportunity to be with you again today. I just want to give you an update from the last time that we met with you, when we talked about the Whistleblower program for our hotline. So what we've done is we've compiled a lot of information. Our team has compiled a lot of information from a lot of different communities that have whistleblower policies and hotlines. And when we develop a draft of what those policies we'd like to recommend to you. And upon your recommendation from the last meeting, we've taken that information, we've sent it to your legal counsel and had discussions with them and about the draft of what it is before we can present it to you. And we also feel that the next logical step would be that we send it to your superintendent for his input to review the policy, and then we bring the final document, not the final document, the final draft to your policy to review and give input on to approve that. And that's where we stand as of now. We feel that once we, if you approve, once we send it to the superintendent to review and get the feedback, probably a week away from sending what we believe is a good draft document to you to approve. But one of the recommendations I would make is that as you're moving forward, not to have time go by, is maybe simultaneously putting out the RFP for him to do the whistleblower and the hotline. But if you put an RFP out now while we're doing the review, that time can happen at the same time that we're reviewing this final document for you. And that's a recommendation that I'd like to make to you. So that's my update, and I'm willing to answer any questions you all have.
Okay, any questions or comments about? Can you go a little bit more in detail about the RFP and, you know, what,
Sure.
is that getting the third party?
That's, yeah, the RFP would be to get the third party, and we'll give you a written request to do that. Well, what that is to hire the firm that would actually handle the calls coming in. And so that's that third party that would, you'd have a phone number that you could advertise and put out that people could use. You could put it on your website. So it's the RFP is for the company that actually would handle the phone calls coming in and handle the initial phase of any tips that come in through there. Then what they would do is they would summarize and give it to us, and then we would be able to review that and do investigations for you.
Do you have recommendations, since you've done this for other districts? Can you tell us a little bit about the other districts?
Yes, ma'am.
State your name, please.
My name is Matt Blundell with RSM. And yes, ma'am, we have been compiling some information from some of our other clients and some other school districts around the state to see which vendors they're using for the answering service. And we can certainly provide that to the board or to your procurement services division for their assistance in determining what the best next steps would be to go out for an RFP. Yes.
One of the questions that I had related to cost. We have a pretty active group of individuals that regularly email Department of Education, IG, et cetera. I fully would expect them to avail themselves of a hotline. And then the cost of the investigations in terms of how that would be borne. Because I could see something like this becoming pretty costly, because we've already borne quite a bit of cost chasing some of this stuff down, and I anticipate having to do it again if we were to put something like this in. So curious as to how those things would be vetted and the cost associated with being able to control costs is our biggest concern, obviously.
I'll jump in on that one. I've done this throughout my career, and one of the things I recommended at the last meeting that we had is that we could put these guardrails in place on how things take place. So just to kind of theoretically how it would work, the hotline would take the calls, and they would summarize the information. They more than likely would assign an anonymous number to the person so nobody could track it back. And they would make a determination whether it had enough merit to go forward. So say they made the first determination, there seems to be enough information to go forward, then that would come to us. And then what we could do is we could look at it and say, hey, there's 7 that seem to make this number up. So there's 7 that seem to have merit. Of these, there's 3 that we ask you or ask the people here and say, it's already been investigated. Say, well, let's look at what was been investigated. Maybe speak to legal counsel and say it's already been resolved in certain manner. Say, okay, they would come off our list and we're not going to go and redo this all over again. And now you're left with these other 4. And what I recommended last time is what we can do is we can come back and say, hey, there's 4 that seem to have merit, haven't been investigated before. This is what we think the scope would be to do these. We think it would cost X amount of dollars to do the initial phase. And then the guardrail part could be is you all can approve a certain dollar amount to say, and again, I make the number up. Say you said up to $10,000, you could go forward and do that. When you start getting close to the $10,000 amount, come back and talk to us about where we stand. And then you can always have the ability to do the go, no-go from there going forward. And I'd recommend that because they could be extremely expensive if they're really big. But you know what also might happen is, based on my experience, you might get to a point where, let's say, make up the number, say it was $10,000. Say we got the $10,000 level and say, look, we really think this has merit, could move forward, should move forward, but maybe it makes more sense to give it to the IG, the Attorney General, or someone else that wouldn't cost you any money to do it. Okay. So it's those type of things. And at the end, it's your policy. You'd make that decision going forward. This committee would.
Yeah, so my comment would be that I would,
Your mic.
oh, it's over here, sorry. My comment would be that then this board has to work, while we're doing the RFP, we have to put together a protocol and a policy. And so that's our job. So, how are we going to proceed with a draft protocol and policy for this board to discuss before we implement a hotline?
Well, isn't that what RSM has done, at least preliminarily, in looking at the other districts and putting something together that we can look at?
Right. Yes, and Madam Chair, that's exactly what we've done. So when you see what we will present to you, probably once it gets reviewed by your superintendent, probably within a week or so, and I'm not putting time frame on you to do this, but probably within a week or so, you will see a well thought out and well-written policy that's a recommendation to you to either thumbs up or thumbs down to it. But I think what you're asking, you'll see in this document. We've culled it out of others, what we believe is the best out of the ones we've seen, and we're going to present that to you.
I'm just curious why we're having this conversation then.
Well, the question that came up is, us receiving that document before the superintendent and the staff gets to look at it. I think, to me, that's the question on the table. If we are going to set policy, then what precludes us from looking at the document and then advising the superintendent and staff to work with RSM and the attorneys to look at any particular, issues with it. RSM has already spoken to the attorneys about it, and they have reviewed the document. So that's what's out there on the table.
So I think where we're at a point that the board had a discussion regarding the hotline some time ago, and I think we're just trying to sort out what that next step would be, and so therefore we're here with just an update. And then now that we have the update, I think the next step would be they provide us the draft policies, we review that, provide it to the board with recommendations, and then we move forward to hopefully implement something in the near future. So to put those in place, I was glad you said what you said about the guardrails and so forth. That was the biggest cost, was just making sure we understand the parameters and the costs, and so that the board has an opportunity to do what it wants to do in terms of looking into certain matters, but also being able to have the ability to control costs while doing that.
Anyone else? One question I have is about, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mary.
So back to the guardrails and the concern that the superintendent vocalized. Is there a mechanism for identifying people who utilize the hotline an inordinate amount of time? Because you said something about a number that's not identifiable.
What happens is, the reason why you do the anonymous number is so that people feel comfortable that they can raise an issue with the hotline without being punished in their job or somewhere else.
Right.
So they usually assign an anonymous number, so that anybody that goes in the system just sees a number, not a person's name and address.
But each person has their own number.
So each person would have, well, if you call 3 or 4 times, you might be assigned 3 or 4 different anonymous numbers.
That's what I was wondering.
They're not compartmented to the same person. The point I was making is, yes, you could have a person that, I'm not going to give them an adjective. You can have a person that calls a lot,
Every day.
every day. With this, we've seen that. They call every day an issue, but when that initial discussion takes place and asking questions about the evidence to back it up, that initial screening will say, this isn't worth going forward because there's not enough information here. Or the second thing would be, it doesn't seem like it rises to a level being a criminal or something like that. They wouldn't go forward. The next step would come to us. If you approve the policy the way the policy would be, it would come to us. And then that's when I said, let's say there was a list of them. And then we can have the conversation with the council superintendent and say, look, these are the 7. And it looks like you tell us that 3 of those we've already investigated. We might say, can you just show us that it's been investigated so we can see that it has been done, and then take them off the list. And that's how we control costs. That first cut, 2 cuts. The first cut is that the hotline people make a decision whether this is just a hoax or whether it has merit. The second cut is when we take the look at that and we look at the information, and then we'd have a discussion, have you already investigated these things before? And then the third one would be, we might look at it and say, after about 10 hours, this has no merit, let's just stop. Or after maybe 30 hours, this has a lot of merit, and maybe it makes more sense to give this to the Attorney General or somewhere else, and that'd be a recommendation to come back to you. But never just running and let the clock go the whole time.
So then passing it on to the IG or someone like that would be another guardrail for cost.
Correct. But that would be something we would have a discussion with your legal counsel, whether,
Okay.
and whether to move forward or not on our own.
Ms. Vaughn?
My comment on all this is, rather than being overly worried about a small group of people overutilizing this, is let's be positive about this and think about the high number of people that will use it who never would step up to the podium here or email the board for fear of retribution against them. I think we really have, we talk about, okay, maybe it's a $10,000, and I'm certainly very cognizant of having to save money. But on the other hand, what if the $10,000 that we had to put out there yields a $50,000 savings? I loved the story that,
The tires.
what's the lady, what's her name? Claire, sorry. That Claire told about the employee, and she felt so bad, and then lo and behold, this thing had been going on for many, many years. So not to say that we have that situation, but it's, it's the people in the trenches that see things, and it's the people in the trenches that are afraid for fear of losing their job to bring things up. So I think we should, frankly, I'm sensing a little bit of hesitation on moving this forward on the part of a couple of my colleagues here, but I think we need to move this forward, look at the documents, and move forward as soon as possible.
Madam Chair, could I respond?
Oh, definitely.
What I would tell you, and I believe I mentioned the last time I came here, national studies have shown that whistleblower and hotline policies actually do reduce the risk of fraud because people do feel more comfortable to come forward. And what we were discussing was just those safety valves that are put in place to protect it from just running out of control, but it actually is one of the better things to do to reduce the risk of fraud. And as I also mentioned last time, the way it works in practice is generally people do the right thing because you hire good people. The human resources does their job, do background checks and hire good people. But the other way to reduce fraud is that people do the right thing if someone's watching or if the punishment is so great. And so with the whistleblower hotline policy, someone's watching, and just that aura of that exists reduces the risk of fraud.
I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you. I do think that this could ultimately lead to some savings, but I also think that there's a difference between perception and reality. And I had this discussion during my TALC meeting this week, and the TALC and SPALC leadership completely identify that retaliation is not something that this administration would engage in, yet there is that perception by some people out there. And so the question that I posed was, how can we, as a SPALC and TALC organization, work with the district to help employees feel comfortable coming forward when they have concerns? And so I think that guardrails surrounding those complaints that come in are important, because my first 2 to 3 years on the board, I have seen an incredible unnecessary drain on resources and an incredible unnecessary impact on the morale of district staff and other employees who are wrongfully accused of doing things. So I think we have to keep an eye on both that perception of retaliation and also the morale of staff when inaccurate accusations are made. So the hotline is important, with an understanding of the guardrails necessary in place to make sure that this is truly effective and we don't end up losing money as a result. So that's just kind of where I'm coming from. I'm excited to get the policy. I do think it's appropriate for the superintendent and his staff to review it before we see it, because policies don't ever come in front of us that haven't been first vetted by the board attorney and staff. I mean, they're the ones who are in the trenches. They're the ones who are gonna know what's legal, what's illegal, what works for this district, what doesn't work for this district. And then at that point, if we as a board feel like any changes are necessary, it is a draft. That's the point when we engage in the conversation, I think, so. That's where I'm coming from on this.
Yes, ma'am.
Even if we can say that no retaliation has happened, the perception that it might happen keeps people from, I mean, I've spoken to people who say, please don't use my name and that sort of thing. And it's staff of all levels, actually. The second thing I would say is we have our own board attorney, and the RSM is, they're our employees. We have hired RSM. So I don't see any problem with the school board looking at what they put forth first and using our board attorneys, who are our employees, to advise us on this. That's the route I would go. I don't see why we can't see these first.
Other comments? One question I have is, when the calls come in, is there any way to determine if it's an employee, because it is an employee hotline, correct? So and I think what I'm hearing from some of those here is, there are outside entities that have a tendency to continue to call and to continue to stir up things. How can we put in place some guardrail for that, to know this is not an internal employee situation, but an outside situation that could cost us time and money?
Well, one of the things is, when people call, they could identify themselves as being an employee, and some of them, we have to always remember they're afraid to say anything about themselves. So some of them, no matter what steps you put in place, will still want to remain anonymous. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that we would ignore, or that group would ignore them, because an anonymous tip can still be a valid tip and can be a worthwhile tip. So to keep in mind that at every level you're going to have professionals in place. You're going to have professionals that do this for a living on the call-in line. They're going to know the right questions to ask. They're going to know the right follow-up questions to ask to see whether it really does have merit or not, to see whether there's evidence, or the person knows enough to know where you would find the evidence to find this, to vet out the situation. So that's the first level. The second level of professionalism will be us at RSM when we step in on our experience to look through this stuff to figure it out. And then, like I said, once we make that next cut happens with us in a conversation with your legal team to determine. So I think before it ever got to the point where it was expending an unreasonable amount of money, it would have been already clear already to know that it was valid to move forward. And as far as the whistleblower, you'll see when you get the documents, because I mentioned the first time, that's really important to have a whistleblower policy. You will have a recommended whistleblower policy to read through and say, am I okay with this? Do I want extra guardrails in here as well? Because again, like you mentioned, it's your policy, it's not our policy. We're giving you a recommendation, you can adjust it the way you want. We're just giving it to you based upon years of experience, of years of seeing this take place.
What is the possibility, and I'm asking this to those of us up here at the table, of doing a workshop, and then Attorney Quick, you have to weigh in on this. If we're talking about a policy like this, could we have a workshop with the superintendent, well, the governance team, all of us, and staff that would be involved, and RSM and the attorneys, to actually sit and discuss it? Is that beyond, the scope of the law? Do we have to do it in shade? What would that mean?
I mean, if you're going to do it as a workshop, as an additional meeting and on top of what's required by the statute and by your policies, I think it would be okay. It would have to be at a workshop meeting. If it's done through a briefing or an action meeting, then you would have to comply with the notice requirements and the different steps that they. But I don't see why you couldn't add an additional meeting before you get to those steps to have a further workshop discussion.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I think that we do have as a part of our process where you're talking about workshop briefings as it relates to board policies, and this would be no different. We could, I would say, we have drafts. We start working on drafts. Board gets those copies real soon, and then we can start to get these things in place. I mean, I'm not opposed to a workshop, but I don't see it necessarily. It's still just a board policy, and that gives an opportunity for the board twice, actually, to weigh into the policy
Right.
publicly, and then that way, I know I do sense there's a desire to get moving forward, so this gets us kind of moving forward and getting this in place relatively quickly.
Yes, ma'am.
I just had a question, because my understanding, well, what Ms. Gittens had just said a second ago regarding employee hotline, there is no way that you could control who is making those calls.
Can't.
So it can't stop an outside person or any of us from calling regardless if we work here or not.
That's true, because we wouldn't know, and because like I said, somebody could be anonymous, and you wouldn't want to just rule them out completely, because what if it was valid, what they said? You would at least want to have that initial screening of what the complaint was.
So the hotline is exactly that, it's a hotline for whomever.
Correct.
But he did mention that they will have stopgaps in place to keep it from being,
So the stopgaps after the fact would be,
After
but what
the
I'm
call
saying is it
comes
still
in.
might be, it could be an anonymous person that now we already determined is probably not an employee, as an example, but it seems like it's extremely valid. You've done some initial screening. We've had the conversations, say with the legal team, and say, look, this is what we got so far, and this looks like it's something worthy to go forward. I'm not sure if it came from an employee or not, because it was anonymous, but it came in, we checked it, and it actually looks like it's got red flags all over it. We should go forward. I don't think you should dismiss those. That's what I'm saying, but I can't say that that was an employee in the beginning.
Correct, I just want
can't.
that to be clear, that
I can't.
there's no way of you knowing that and determining that.
No.
Correct,
Mr.
okay,
Canal?
thank you.
So I think with the professionals, they ask the right questions. I think this will eliminate the unnecessary investigations that are not valid. I think because they're asking the right questions, they're the professionals. I think putting trust in that process, I think, works, because it works in other places. So I say let's move forward. I don't know that we need a workshop. I was just gonna, with the briefings, you have the protocol, it's briefed how many times before we vote on it. So I think that, I think that'll cover it. I think, and that's because you're adding an extra
right.
meeting that I don't think it's necessary if we want to move this down the road.
Well, the only reason I brought it up is that there was concern of the question of whether the board should see it before staff and the superintendent see it. And that's why I was saying perhaps if we had a workshop and we all saw it together, since as the governance team, it's going to come down to us as our policy. That was the concern I had.
Well, again, my thought is, though, they're writing policies for a lot of places, so I trust that process as well. So I think let's see it.
You had I thought someone else. Anyone else have a comment? Yes, ma'am.
Well, this is a workshop.
Yes.
And we're having a discussion.
Right.
What is missing are the sample policies.
Correct.
But we have a board attorney.
Who's already
Vetted
looked at
that.
them?
Okay.
Okay.
They've already looked at them
Yeah.
and spoke with ours.
Okay,
So-
and that's why we have them.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes. Exactly.
So, the decision is whether the board can look at them as well, or if it goes to the superintendent and staff before the board sees it.
Okay, maybe Mr. Quick can clarify this in my mind. We have a board attorney, that's our employee. We have an auditing firm, RSM, our employee. What, is there a problem with putting this into the hands of the board rather than saying, well, the superintendent and his office should have initial input.
In terms of legal, I
In
don't
terms
see
of
a- yeah, I don't
legal
see a
and
legal reason
procedures and,
why it would have to go to one or the other first. I mean, it certainly, obviously, there's practical considerations that are for you all to take into consideration. But from a legal perspective, since this is being generated by an outside entity, the recommendations are being generated by an outside entity that you all retained as opposed to, which is kind of standard, mostly they're generated by, staff when it comes to you. I don't see a legal reason why it has to go to one or the other first. I mean, respond from my perspective, and the board, can certainly do whatever the board would like to do in this case. Typically, you have something that would be vetted through staff, just so staff can provide input into how a certain policy that's a draft policy from other districts would work within this particular school district. I don't anticipate any substantial change or edits or drafts. It's not an attempt to hide anything. I just think that, A, professional courtesy, B, to give a better first draft for the board to consider that's closer to what the final product would be the purpose for a staff review prior to board. But again, whatever the board's pleasure, I'm fine with, but that was typically how things that I've seen done, not just here, but in other places.
Yes.
Madam Chair, just if I can comment on what I hear now. I can let you know from prior experience in almost every community, there is it's actually a good practice to have the conversation with leadership from your executive team. Because keep in mind that we're also, and I've had limited interaction with your superintendent here, but I know just from conversations that we can handle this in a professional manner, and we're professionals too. The thing is that you want to make sure it's right before we bring it to you. And if anyone ever tried to change it to a way or water it down completely, we're professional enough to come before you and say, hey, in this new revised, we can't stand behind it anymore. I don't envision that ever happening here. So I know it'd be a good protocol if you'd all consider doing that, and we could spend the time with the superintendent to go over it. And like I said, even in our interaction, I'm sure it will come back either no change or limited change, and maybe just discussion on what it's all about. Because it has been vetted out in several communities already.
So can I ask, for the sake of time and all of that, that we take consensus that and to direct the superintendent to get with staff and RSM and the attorneys as necessary to look at it and then to bring it back to us, and that we have a time limit on that?
I don't know that we need consensus for that. That's how we operate already with policies that come before the board. That's what we do.
Well, there was
I mean, yeah, if you want
different
consensus, I will give consensus.
That's right, yes, ma'am.
But what time limit? I think how long? That's all.
What do you
I'll
two?
listen to you. We're ready to give you the draft, so maybe I'm not putting you in the box. You tell us what the time would be.
I would say we should be able to get this to the board, a draft next week,
Oh.
if that's all right.
And can
We're
we?
talking 3 policies, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And now there are notice requirements as well, so I think, if I remember correctly, I'll have to look back at the policies, but I believe it's 28 days under the policy, and then you can have the briefing, but I think it's no less than 14 days after the notice, so it would be, I just want to make sure, in terms of timing, that would actually put it probably about 2 weeks as to, I'll double check the policies, we'll make sure the notice is proper, but it may be 2 weeks before you could even first bring it forward.
And you had mentioned earlier about simultaneously, so that we're not pushing this down the road so far, to look at the selection of the third party.
It was a recommendation so that you can get this up and running. If you're all in consensus to move forward with the overall theory about having it, then it would make sense to run the RFP the same time. So that's going to take time to run its course, and this could be done simultaneously. And a lot of times what I try to do is just try to condense time by doing simultaneous actions.
And in your discussions with the superintendent and staff, can that be formulated?
With your approval, we could do that.
Okay, so is everyone in agreement to let them go ahead with that? Yes, ma'am?
So will we be getting the policy, let's call it draft, at the same time that the superintendent gets it?
Well, no, I think what they're saying is that RSM has looked at it with the attorney, and now RSM will get with the superintendent and staff.
But we haven't seen, as a
Right,
board,
I know,
we haven't
but what-
seen, so why can we not see it at the same time?
I think we're being told by the professionals that the best way to go about implement or approving a policy is to get as much feedback from the professionals who will be implementing that policy on a day-to-day
Yeah,
basis.
but I'm not
I
saying they should be not included. I can understand that, I've been listening, but why can't we see it at the same time? So while they're reviewing it, we can be thinking about it as well. That's all I'm asking.
Ms. Fisher?
So it was my understanding that we had already agreed to enter
do
into
it.
this process and that
Right.
it was in progress. And so typically, when we have policies come before us, when it's not an outside entity proposing the policy or giving us the draft, the superintendent and staff and the board attorney review that and prepare it for our review. And no action is taken until we are
Right.
workshopped and briefed, and then we decide whether we approve
Right.
the policy or not. It's part of the normal process that we use, so I don't know what is,
And so basically what we are saying then, our normal policy, the policy of several other districts that they've worked with, is to get a draft to us so we can see kind of the final, not final draft, but the draft that has the legal and the staff and the superintendent's, input on it.
right.
And then we go from there. And, I mean, I feel comfortable, especially with you saying that if it is too far from what you have proposed from others, that you will make that known as well.
Oh, I have
So-
a career of having courageous conversations.
I like that, courageous conversation.
Yes.
Okay, so, since it's already something that we do, I guess we move forward. What we need consensus on is to go ahead and do the simultaneous discussion when they have their discussion, to allow them to go ahead and also discuss that third-party piece. So is everybody in consensus with that? Can we see consensus?
What
to
you're
move forward?
saying.
I don't understand what you just said.
So-
Yeah.
Okay,
So I would
yes.
ask to hear from the board attorney and the superintendent regarding that.
In terms of, from the legal end, if, obviously this is not an action meeting, so this is just a workshop, so that, I mean, if what you're looking for is just if there's a general flavor to, for your, the superintendent to discuss the RFP process during the discussion that he's going to be having, or he and his staff are going to be having with regard to the policies, I think that that's fine. I mean, he can see what the discussion is and what the flavor is of the board. But obviously, no action can be taken in terms of specifically directing or anything like that. But it's just consensus as to what you guys would like for him to
Practice,
discuss,
yeah.
and then that way they can discuss it.
Well, are we in agreement to, we've already agreed to move forward with the process. Are we in agreement to go ahead and move forward with the selection process for the third party, which is something that is critical to moving forward? If we wait on that, then the whole process gets backed up further and further, and we have more time, which is, going by without the process being in place.
His recommendation was to do both, so I think that we,
That makes sense, to do it
Yes.
concurrently or simultaneously.
Do you have other comments?
No, I
Okay.
think that's fine.
Is that agreeable?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so you will move forward with the superintendent and
Yes.
staff to discuss the document and the RFP for selection of third party, and we will get something as the board in writing by next week sometime. And any other comments or questions? Yes, ma'am?
I'm just curious, Chair Gittens, have you seen
No, I haven't.
policy? So it's just been our board attorney. I'm just wondering what the problem is with all of us seeing
We'll see it
what's,
next week. I mean, just,
what, I don't understand the reasoning that we can't, I know we're not taking an action, but frankly, I'd like to see it. So if I need to ask the board attorney, I just want to ponder over what the initial,
yes, and we do need to
policy
move
was.
on, yes.
I would agree. I mean, I would like to see it too, so does that make a difference? Yeah, so there we go.
Okay.
Okay, so,
I'm between a rock and a hard place. I honestly don't see what, if we know that it's a draft, I don't understand what the issue is either.
I just want to see it.
Yes, ma'am. I thought you had a comment.
No?
Can I leave it, the attorneys have it, right, Mr. Quick? Okay, so could I leave it with those individually that would like to see it, to contact the attorney, to follow through on that? And then we would all agree, though, that even if we do see it, there is no action that will be taken on it. There is no
Right.
anything that will be done with it. Is just for our own individual edification and not to be shared because it is not a final document.
Okay.
Are we in agreement of that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right. No
Just
other
so
comments?
The three that I have, Ms. Giovanelli, Ms. Vaughn, and Ms.
Just going to email it to you right now,
Is
make
any-
it
I'm
official.
writing it down so I have, if there's anybody else liking to send it, obviously in draft format.
Okay. And if there's no other questions for these gentlemen, thank you so much for coming, and you
Nice to see you
will.
all again.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. You'll set up with them the time to meet?
Yes,
Okay.
We'll be in touch. Okay.
Thank you very much, we
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, I know that took a little longer, but I think that it was necessary to get all of that flushed out. Our next thing is the agenda review. So if everyone can turn to the agenda for our Tuesday action meeting. We have one question that was received, and that's in G. Do you want to cover that first, and then we just go on down the line, or how do you want to do that, Superintendent?
Yeah, that would be fine. The first one was a question regarding G3, the approval of the budget amendment dated 30th, 2019. And the question was an increase of 2+ mil, yet decreases in salaries and materials. And
Would Ms. Fisher like to
Yeah,
verify
I
what?
can't get my computer up.
so Dr. Desimores can address that.
I just noticed in, I'm sorry, here it
What
comes.
do you, here?
Would you like to clarify your question, Ms.
What?
Fisher?
Yeah, I'm just trying to,
What?
I wasn't able to get my computer.
Okay, here, use
so-
mine. What area?
So here, it's 3J3. Okay. So I just noticed in the budget amendment to the board that the total budget increased by over 2 million. Then in looking down in its salaries and, for instance, instructional services, the salaries, there was a $4.5+ million decrease in salaries. I was just wondering what that's attributed to.
Yes, very good question. Thank you for that. So what what most of that is attributable to is the movement of the budget out of salaries and benefits account line into contracted services account lines in order to pay for speech services that were needed for some of our students. So some of those are provided by contract anyway, so the contracted services plus the inability to hire the positions that we had out there for speech, they were able to procure contracted services. So we moved that budget from salaries where they were originally set up to contracted services in order to pay for the services.
Thank you.
So that was where the vast majority of that came from.
Great.
But thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the answer.
Okay. Is that coming up or is that on here? Or briefing?
I'll
Okay.
answer a question, and if I don't hit it, you tell me
Okay,
if I don't get it right.
okay, all right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. Okay, so Ms. Fisher, that answers your
That
question?
answers my question, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, so we move down to section E. Anything that anyone has on that? And we have a resolution for National Inclusive Schools Week. My question on that was how are we, I won't say celebrating as such, but what are we doing to,
Thank you.
I know that Mr. Edie and his team will be involved. And what specifically are we doing to recognize that week?
Well, unfortunately, Mr. Edie is not here. He
Right,
is in
that's right.
Texas, and I'm sure he would be able to answer that question better than I, but I'll see if I can get something in the board update. If not, then he'll return, and he'll be able to address that question.
Okay. Anyone else have questions under that? Questions under,
I will say, I mean, you know, one of the things that I think that we had some of our board members in attendance to a recent training that we did for our principals that was on this very topic, and I think it was I stayed for the majority of it. I think it was a very good training. I think it was a training that you know, was very relevant to our principals, and that they are, you know, they're really on the front lines along with our teachers in terms of addressing issues of inclusiveness in a wide range of different areas. This particular conversation, I think, allowed for the principals to hear from a person who has had experience in multiple districts, including Broward County, in setting policies, providing training, providing our principals with really the latest in terms of the legal context of which they have to operate, you know, and also with a real, I think, eye toward really doing what's in the best interest of supporting the needs of all of our students. So while it's not directly in celebration of this, I think the training is very relevant to, and in good timing with this resolution coming before the board.
okay, thank you.
And I just want to mention that at the FSBA joint conference in December, there'll be a presentation, and our own Crystal Torres Nunez will be presenting. So we'll be able to hear some of that information from
Who did you say would be?
Crystal Torres
I
Nunez.
saw that.
Yeah.
Yes, one of the
So
members of the
encouraging.
dynamic diversity duo.
Well,
Yeah.
her sister, I had a meeting with her sister yesterday, and her sister is also a rock star. That's why I asked for you to repeat the name,
Oh, okay.
because I
Yes.
didn't know which one you were talking about, which rock star you were talking about.
That one.
Family of rock stars. Okay, in section F under academic services. Anyone, questions? Just as I was looking through this, and this is talking about the football league and grants and all of that. And I think yesterday saw where someone mentioned about the football field at MMM. Is it possible for us to get the same type of a grant proposal for MMM?
Can I ask? Yeah, I can't answer that off the top of my head, but I can certainly
Right.
see if I can.
If we can find out about that,
Yeah.
I'd appreciate it.
One of the things, again, with Fort Myers High School that is
History.
important to note is that you know, that particular stadium and that particular campus is very small. And therefore, they don't have the normal practice fields that you have in other locations. So there's really a greater need here than what you might find in other places, because the fields at Fort Myers High School get a lot more wear and tear than what's typical. They also have I think they have a lacrosse team, soccer team, and of course the band, and that puts a lot of extra wear and tear on that field. And then the track is not total regulation in terms of the number of lanes that it has. So all of that is this is something that Dr. Butts had come and asked us about, I want to say over a year ago.
Yes.
And we told him to go ahead and proceed, and so it's kind of neat to see this coming forward.
I'm just saying, if it's a grant that could help us do that, I mean, we've got, you know, besides Fort Myers High School, then can we look at it for other schools? I mean, even, and I said MMM, I'm sorry, I apologize, it is Gateway High School. As also Riverdale needing facilities for the same reasons, that it's just too small to like host their, and they're talking more about the gym and all that. But is this a grant that might be able to be used in some of those other situations? So that's the question that if we could get an answer to.
Good morning. I do believe there is another grant available for that, but the issue is that the grant is for $250,000, and the funding for the turf is $700,000. So in order to make that happen, there has to be fundraising and things that happen. So that's why with Mr. Butts, he actually has donors that are going to match the grant and has been able to come up with the additional funds. So that's the, you know, I think we could look at other schools, but do they have the means to raise the other funds?
Yes, ma'am.
And actually, I spoke to him about that. Actually, he spoke to me about it, actually. And he's working hard to fundraise. He wanted to fundraise it all, and he was hopeful to do that. So, you know, why would you stop someone from the,
Oh, no.
well, you know what I'm saying? So we gave him the go-ahead, I think, pretty much you know what I'm saying? And this is what he's done. And so I commend him for because this is quite a large undertaking to do. And it's actually happening sooner than I thought. So, you know, because, I mean, it's a lot of money. So this is his baby, and he's doing really well with it. So I'm supportive of all his efforts.
And please, I'm not against it. I'm just looking as to how can we expand it to others, that's all.
And I understand what you're saying, and equity throughout the district, and I get it, but my point is that this school took this on as their own.
Right, and they are to be applauded highly for doing this. That's a lot of money.
This is his vision and dream, and he's making it happen.
Right, so they raised over $300,000.
Right.
And that enabled them to apply for that grant, the $250. You know, there's a partnership component to that.
Okay.
So, and the one thing, I was just gonna repeat, but the other day at the Gateway High School groundbreaking, I heard a comment that the whole project is fully funded thanks to our community supporting the sales tax. So
Okay.
we're good to go there.
Ms. Vaughn?
I was just going to comment, yes, I think this is great. I applaud Fort Myers High School for doing that. However, frankly, it is somewhat of a concern when I hear anybody say, okay, so the grant and the schools have the wherewithal to match, because let's be honest, we're trying to create equity in our district, and frankly, there are schools that don't have the wherewithal. I mean, Fort Myers High School, it's an iconic school in the district and has a huge support of donors and boosters and all of that. But not all of our schools, because of the demographics that are involved, have that support system. So I'm not sure who needs it. My comment is directed toward the realization for us as a district that, as wonderful as it is that Fort Myers can
And
do
equity
this,
was a discussion.
wouldn't it be wonderful if all our schools had this? Realistically, they don't. So we need to keep that in mind moving forward and take a look at some other schools that may have shortcomings in athletic or other facilities.
Right.
The equity was a discussion, and the equity is already, there is an inequity already with the field that they have, because they're landlocked, and so they have a smaller field, and so they have a need for the turf because they can't keep up with, they've had to replace the grass multiple times.
One of the things that we were attempting to do with the naming rights policy, but I think larger with the whole revenue generation thing, is to try to do a sharing across the district so that we can provide additional dollars to schools that don't have the means. Like, as an example, at this point, it would be a little bit more difficult for some of our newer schools, such as East Lee County's relatively new Island Coast, because they don't have strong alumni to be able to do that. And this is a way that the district can kind of use the NFL models per se to revenue share, so that these other schools have the opportunity. That's why Green Bay can continue to have the Green Bay Packers, because of revenue sharing. And we can adopt some similar policy when we come to how we generate revenue overall in the district as a district, and then able to spread it out to some of the schools that have less of a means to fundraise. For example, Bonita Springs High School has that wonderful ability right off 75 to have a lot of advertising dollars, whereas some of other high schools that are tucked into areas that wouldn't have that opportunity, wouldn't be fair for them to be able to generate all of that money and get able to hold on to that, whereas a school that didn't have that opportunity didn't have that. So we want to share that way. Hopefully we'll be able to do something with signs, the digital signs that we're talking about with Lamar, kind of a similar type of thing to allow us to be able to share revenue across the district.
Yeah, and regarding Lamar, I was at City Council a week ago Monday, and Lamar presented the city with a $45,000 check for the royalties on the 2 billboards that they have in the city. So it's considerable amount of money in short period of time.
That's- Okay.
I just
You
wanted to.
haven't spoken, so can you hold just 1 second?
Yeah,
and then-
sure.
I hear you, Ms. Vaughn, what you're saying about potential inequities. And I think that we, as a governance team, can be part of the solution to that problem. So I go to an event like Build Your Future, and I see a lot of businesses engaged with wanting to help our students get engaged in hands-on learning so that they can contribute to their businesses later on. I think that it's our job as a governance team and as a leadership team to be engaging those business owners and help them understand that if your business is located in Lehigh, you might still be getting students from Cape Coral who will be working for you someday. So taking more of a district-wide approach as opposed to a specific location approach, I feel like a lot of that is on us as we go out and try to help people understand what we're doing. Somebody said recently, we're doing a lot in CTE, right? We're doing a lot in CTE, and the public has the perception, and perception doesn't always match reality, that we're not doing anything in CTE. So I think that as we expand those CTE opportunities and we create opportunities, create, foster, and strengthen relationships with businesses, that can lead to more equity and funding across the district.
I'm sorry, Ms. Giovanna.
And also, I was going to I can add, is that I think this board's commitment is to make sure that everything's equitable and to find those ways to do that. And I think that to the schools that don't have the opportunity of raising the $309,000 and so forth. So I think as a board, we can commit to that, and I think the district's working on that diligently to find ways to to spread the wealth without giving up $309,000 to other schools. Sorry, can't do that.
Well, and I, again, want to just go on record, by bringing that up was in no way to lessen or, go against what Fort Myers High School has done, in no way, shape, or form. I still and will continue to always have in the back of my mind, how can we help the resources to be there for other schools as well? That's just who I am, and that's what I'll always continue to bring up. I applaud the ones that can afford it. What can we do as a governance team to help those that cannot? So that's why I brought it up. You had a comment? No? Other comments? Okay. We have anything in human resources? No discussion? Don't come up yet, we may not have anything, no. Oh, good, okay.
If there's any questions first, though.
I don't think we have any, please go ahead.
So I just wanted to provide an update on attainable housing and where we are with that. And so, because there's been some questions and conversation. The journey for attainable housing in the school district, from my perspective, really began back in 2016, is when we really started having meetings with community members and people that have brought forward proposals relative to attainable housing. The challenge up until a year ago was we had no capital dollars at all that we could contribute towards attainable housing. And so the conversations kind of stalled out at that, because the proposals that came forward were always looking for either us to give up free property or to take on liability, to become property managers, to become, and they all had, and then the biggest thing is the liability that they wanted the school district to take on. Once the sales tax passed, and that sort of lightened up the load relative to some of the things, we sort of have ramped up those conversations, and we are continuing to have conversations through folks with the Southwest Florida Attainable Housing Coalition, with Lee Health, who is also looking to have they have some attainable housing needs relative to their primarily their nursing staff. And we've also had some conversations with Volunteers of America, who have done some attainable housing with a school district in another part of the country. So what our plan is, Dr. Savage and I are going to, we're hoping January, at the latest February, come to you with sort of a comprehensive approach to attainable housing, the options that are out there, what people have brought forward to us, the pros and the cons of those things, and then hopefully provide the opportunity for this board to make a decision about, is this an arena that we want to go down? Is this a commitment we want to make, and what are we willing to do in regard to that? So just kind of wanted to provide that as a timeline, and see if at this point there was any feedback or questions that you might have on what Dr. Savage and I are proposing to do.
No, originally we were really hoping to be able to get you a briefing in December, and the hiccup there has been with
Health.
Lee Health.
Yep.
So my question is, have we involved any community surveys and see what the buy-in, because I mean, if we were to actually give up property, that's the community's property. It's not our, you know what I mean? So I think that we need to engage in the community and see if they're going to be supportive of that. We certainly wouldn't want to start something that we start getting pushback from the community after the fact.
I absolutely agree. And some of the conversations we're having, while the district would quote unquote donate the land, there would actually be money that would be given to the district for the land. So okay. I don't want to go into too much of the detail about it, because we're still in the discussions, but I absolutely agree with you. We have not done anything in the last 2 years relative to what you're saying. We certainly have continued to solicit feedback from staff in terms of what their needs are and what would be helpful. And the primary thing that we see is that they would love to be homeowners someday, and the challenge is getting that down payment and being able to afford that down payment is primarily what we see. We constantly are working with rental communities to get good, deals, if you will, for our employees in the district, and that's kind of ongoing, that we don't really talk a lot about, but really is a huge benefit to our employees, those negotiations that we do with those properties. We have had lots of realtors come forward and want to try to work with us and do things, and so there's just been a lot of conversation in a lot of ways, but I absolutely agree with you that there would need to be community input relative to that.
Right, well, and as a realtor, I mean, the need is there.
Yes.
So, like, I'm a big advocate of the American dream, so, because I think that the possibility of that should be for everyone, and I feel like it is limited, especially in Lee County, because there's no affordable housing anywhere anymore, really. It's just shocking, actually.
Right.
When you see other places where you could purchase in Texas is like mansions compared to here.
Yep.
Absolutely.
You know, it's scary because I'm like, why? So I'm really curious and want to hear more. But I was, my part of me, I'm always thinking. So like we have a problem with people wanting to drive from Cape Coral to, let's say, Alba, and they do it, and East Lee.
Correct.
And I would love to see housing out there where they can work and live and be near where they work. So,
yeah, and we're on the same page with you. It's I think unfortunately what happens is you have a lot of people that say they have the answer, but it really boils down to they want the district to be liable. They want the district to pick up the tab. They want the district, and that's just not in the best interest of the district.
Right.
Right.
We're in the education business.
Right. Right.
Not the housing business. So I understand that, and
Yeah.
I agree with you. So I think we just have to, I don't know, but we can be supportive and work towards affordable housing. I don't know.
Right. Well, and that's why we want to bring all that to you in a comprehensive way, so that, because we know, probably just like we do, different people approach you all the time, and they're going to solve all that problem for us. But, we have that as well. So we want to come to you with, here are the things that have come forward. Here's the pros and cons of those things, so that we all are hearing and have the same message.
Yeah.
Is kind of
I
what
don't agree with us being landlords in any shape.
I concur.
Thank you so
Miss
much.
Jordan had it. Yeah, sorry.
Ms. Patrica had her hand up first.
Oh, sorry.
I just want to know if you have engaged with FGCU at all, because they have attainable housing.
Only through the Southwest Coalition. We haven't had any separate meetings with them, just as that larger group.
We do have, I think I've mentioned this before, there's a group of us that meets periodically with Randy Antic, who does the event down in Collier County every year. But that's Dr. Antonucci, Dr. Martin, Dr. Albritton, and myself, and affordable housing is attainable housing is the item that we've tried to take on as a group, and probably FGCU is the furthest along in trying to come up with a plan of action that I've seen, and Dr. Martin has been a willing partner to try to, as he moves forward, to try to involve the school district in those plans.
Yep.
Bless you.
Can we say 1, 2, 3? Yeah. I believe Ms. Jordan had.
Yeah, the only thing that I was going to mention, because when I'm out there and I'm speaking to people, and even before I was on the board speaking about the attainable housing, is the fact that the teachers or the people who work for the district, they don't want you to tell them where to live. So when you're saying we're going to have attainable housing, but it's going to be over here like a village, they want the option of living on their own. And then there's actually a gentleman who works, I think, he's a realtor, works with Fort Myers Middle School, who helps them to purchase homes,
Yes.
teachers, and then he gives back to that individual teacher for their classroom.
Yeah, we have several realtors. There's a work perks thing, and anytime a realtor has something that they're offering, we put it out there so that, because we don't want to promote one person over another, so we just put all the information out there, and that way teachers and other staff have the ability to, assess that information and then, make those connections.
And do we vet in any way? And the reason I bring this up, I know there was one situation, a teacher had contacted me, and it was a program for teachers, and they touted it and all of that. And in the end, they had to go back and reverse it and try to get out of it. I don't know all the details, but it brings to mind the question, our part in the vulnerability of our teachers, and where do we, protect
That is
them?
specifically why we don't promote something over, we just provide the information, and that's all we're doing. Yeah, because I understand what you're saying, and that's,
Because then they'll say, well, you told me about this
Right.
program. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So the only other thing I want to say in regard to that is, part of the problem is our teacher salaries. So I think as a governance team, we need to be looking carefully at getting the appeal for the .5 mil property taxes on the agenda for next 2020.
Yep.
And I've already sent a memo to the superintendent and the board attorney asking for some information, about how we can go through that, because that can make a significant difference. And when we had that additional half mil, our salaries were better, as evidenced by one of the people who came to speak at public comment one night, saying how 10 years ago, a 20-year teacher was making $53,000, which isn't a whole lot nowadays when it comes to attainable and affordable housing. And that same length of experience for a teacher now is making 50. So I think that it's incumbent on us to take a look at all possible revenue sources, and that would be a significant one.
yeah, and the surveys from the teachers, they indicate they cannot save to get that down payment.
So just to address that question and to save, because the email came to both of us, and so we'll take care of it if that's okay. Lauren is going to reach out to the elections office and get the date, the filing date that you had
Okay.
requested.
Right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, first, I kind of tapped Ms. Fisher on the arm when she started speaking, because that was the first thing I was going to say is attainable housing means you have to have decent income to qualify. But the second thing I was going to ask is, besides Lee Health, and you mentioned FGCU, are there any government entities that seem to have an appetite for looking at this? One that comes to mind, since I work with a lot of people in social services, and my daughter used to work in social services, is perhaps the professionals that are paid even less than teachers and have to have college degrees and all that are the very social workers that we have. And I know there's a huge problem with that group as well. So I'm wondering if any of those groups, if there's
You
any-
mean outside of the school district
outside
social
of-
workers? Well, I do know, well,
partner with, in the county, if we're going to partner with, I'm just wondering if there are any other government entities that might have an appetite for doing this. One that comes to mind, although it comes to mind with some pessimism in terms of the people that would be able to facilitate that, supporting it. But what other groups do you see that might partner in getting something going in Lee County?
well, I know the Lee County Board of County Commissioners, so the Lee County government, they're at those conversations and at the table from their aspect of where can they provide some tax relief, where can they, that's sort of how their contribution. City of Cape Coral has actually recently just done some attainable housing where they've provided support through the relief of certain, fees that there had to be paid and
Impact
tax credits and, yeah, and like the permitting fees fees and, so they're part of that Southwest Florida Coalition.
Yeah, that was actually what I was gonna ask, I think if we get more, like, the county commissioners and more buy-in from the community, then we'll know if
Right.
that's where we should be going.
So what's the name of the group again? And
Southwest Florida, because they changed it from affordable to Attainable Housing Coalition. Because there's a big distinguishing thing between the word attainable and the word affordable.
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
Okay, and wait,
Southwest Florida, I'm sorry.
Southwest Florida Attainable
Housing Coalition.
Coalition. When and where did they meet?
It's changed, but I can get the information to Dr. Atkins, and
Google it, we can.
you should be able to, but if not, we can get you the information.
Yeah, because I'd love for some of us maybe to make appearances at those meetings and
Sure, that'd be
meet
great.
some of these people, and especially since I'm on the part of the strategic plan about recruitment and
Great.
retention.
We can also get you the information, you'd mentioned the county commissioners, they have the Horizon Council. This has been something.
And it's been yes, I forgot about that.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Topic at Horizon Council, so we'll get you an update in terms of where they are, because I know they've had presentations on it, which I found it to be pretty interesting in terms of some of the solutions that they had that they were offering. But we'll get you the latest update, because I think it's been a while since I've heard anything about it since my last meeting.
Yep. So is everybody comfortable with a January/February date for a comprehensive presentation? Is that acceptable to everybody?
Yes.
Of course.
Great. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Last the people who will be here to answer questions regarding their proposals, will staff be reaching out to them to let them know the timeframe?
That is our plan, to let them know what we're looking to do. Yes.
And before you said under human resources, the other item about the planning jobs and positions.
The operations positions? Okay,
Positions. And the reason I'm bringing it up, I've gotten, since the agenda came out, gotten several phone calls and questions from community and business leaders about adding the amount of positions that we have here, and from educators and teachers, their concern is, this equals almost $1 million. It's 800,000 altogether with all of these positions. And the thought is, what are we doing for teachers? And if we're adding, and remind me again, I think we said when we were talking last year about the bargaining, that in order to give the teachers a 1% raise, it's going to cost us how much? Was that $1 million?
No, 5 million.
It was 5
Not quite
million.
5 million.
So to say, though, that, well, this is round about $1 million, and it wouldn't help going towards the teachers getting an increase, but in their minds it does, because it's a portion of something that could go to. And I guess what I'm asking you is to give us a statement that you would say to a teacher, saying, well, we're hiring all these people and paying them $178,000, and I can't even get, 40 or 50, and I've been here 20 years. What would you respond?
So in a general sense, and then I'll defer to Dr. Atkins and Dr. Savage if he would like to come up, but the majority of those positions are being paid for out of the tax dollars, because they're going specifically to implementing the capital needs that we have in the district. And so my response is, it's not the same pot of money, and I know that they don't, that.
Well, and basically, not to cut you off,
Sure.
one of the things they said is that when the tax was passed, the statement was, if we get the tax, we'll be able to move some of this money, the tax money, over to capital and have more money to give to teachers.
We did do. That's how we were able to give the raise that's going to be given right before they leave for winter break.
So, yeah, and one of the things I think it's important is that if you think of the amount of dollars that we received from the state relative to the amount of dollars that were put toward the raise for the, I think, the fourth year in a row, we put a higher percentage of dollars toward teacher salaries than we had actually received from the state. And the only way we were able to do that was a multitude of things, a multifaceted, really, approach of putting more dollars toward the general fund. Like, one example was through the capital dollars. So we were able to do two different things. The elimination of that growth increment model was one of them, and then we were able to utilize other positions and pay for out of capital, and then free up general fund dollars for the general fund to pay teachers. The second piece was just reductions in other areas, or things like the ratios that you see in terms of staffing ratios. So all that allowed us to put, I think the total for all employees was something in the neighborhood of 26 million, but teachers was 18 of that chunk, a little over 18 million, way higher than just the increase that we had received in the FEFP.
And really, the thing too we need to understand is that, and I communicate when I'm asked, is that in order for us to make the capital improvements that we need to make and we said we were going to make, we have to have the staff to do that. You know, we have to be able to, the money's no good if we don't have the staff to, you know, to implement what needs to be done relative to those capital improvements. So I'm hoping that they see that translates to improved working conditions at their school.
And the main reason I wanted it on record is for you to make those comments, and the superintendent.
Yeah.
Because whenever there is an increased salary or position, that question always comes
Understood.
up. So I would prefer to have them hear it from you too, that's the answer to the question. Yes, ma'am.
Two things. First, maybe I've missed something, but is there a way that when we see these new positions or positions that are already there, there's some way where we will know specifically this comes out of capital dollars? Am I missing something? Is there an indication somewhere?
There isn't currently. I mean, it's.
But, I mean, for us as board members, it might.
We can provide that again. I know that when we did have the one-on-ones, we had the spreadsheet that showed you the 6 out of capital and the 4.
It's here.
But we
on it.
add it, okay.
It's in
So
there, okay. And then the 4.
remind me where it is.
It's under operations H2.
Yeah.
You click on H2 and the documentation with it is there. And it shows you capital and operating and how it comes out.
Okay.
Yeah, the ones that are general fund or operations are the 4 supervisors in transportation and that.
Right,
So
yes.
why can't that be on the ISOC
Yeah,
for people to see? I mean, why can't,
somewhere.
I mean,
We can do that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it's for, so why can't?
Yeah, and I had one other
Yeah.
thing. The other thing is, when Dr. Atkins and I had one-on-one, I think it was just the other day, I've asked in the past about ratios with, and he said you were working.
We are. We
on that.
we're
I
just.
wanted everybody.
Yeah, we have started, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, starting to keep a comprehensive list of all the major school districts, what they have, do they use chiefs, do they use assistant superintendents? So we're just going through that to update it to make sure, and then we're going to provide that to Dr. Atkins to share with you.
Along with a way that we can compare and decide, are we, because we add a lot of positions, and I realize we're growing, and we're having new schools, and we need new positions. But on the other hand, there's really no way to know as we add new positions.
How we compare.
Are we getting top-heavy? And I just have a gut feeling that maybe we are top-heavy, but maybe we're not. But I would just like to see some kind of figures that show.
Yes, my belief is that what we're going to provide you, you'll see very clearly where we stack up, and I would say you're going to be surprised at how
Well, and I think
low we really are.
It's good for us, and it's also
Absolutely.
good for the
Yep.
public, and
Yep.
I'm sure all of us have been asked those kinds of questions.
Yes,
I was
Ms.
just gonna
Jordan
say,
first.
you kind of did that with the legal aspect on here.
And it's a similar, but it really, yeah. The challenge, and again, it was it took us about a year long to do it, because what we learned was a chief is not a chief is a chief, an assistant superintendent is not assistant superintendent. So what we literally got was job descriptions from all the districts. We compared the essential functions, how many it's a comprehensive, so we just want to update it to make sure it's still accurate before we provide that to you.
And before we go on, Dr. Decimo? I don't think you're on.
No. Or right here. You're still going to be on TV.
Yeah, okay. I'm ready for my close-up. I just wanted to provide a clarification, because we mentioned tax dollars a couple times, and I think there was a mention of putting these things on the ISOC website, and I just, on the sales tax website, just wanted to clarify, these positions are not being paid through sales tax dollars. We can't pay positions through sales tax dollars. It is through capital funds, right? The property tax dollars, but not through the sales tax dollars. And I just wanted to make sure to make that clarification, to make sure that we were clear on that. Okay.
And can we, just a suggestion, the layout you have has the amount and the funding source and all that. It may be helpful to also add a column that says this was a previous position that was already there that we hadn't filled.
Okay.
And, or if it's a new position. Does that make sense to understand? Okay. And Ms. Giovanelli had a question.
So I just had a couple concerns regarding the construction jobs we didn't really run that through construction advisory, right? I mean, I don't think we did.
Not the operations,
So
no.
is there any way that we could kind of get that information just out there to them, because I mean, ultimately, I think we want to make sure that they're understanding the need and supportive of that. And because one of the questions someone asked me, will this make our architect fee less with this? So I want to assure the community that that is going to be the case. So I'm hopeful.
So, and just so I understand the request, like a memorandum to the Construction Advisory Committee along with the
That would be
changes?
awesome.
Okay, we could do that
Prior to our action meeting.
prior to the action
Well,
meeting.
it's going to be tough, I think, but at least getting there.
You just want the information communicated to them, is that correct?
Yeah, something.
Yeah, I mean, come on up. Jeez.
I'm deciding if there's a really question here.
No.
Okay, the CAC doesn't meet again.
I know.
CAC doesn't meet again until January, and so we are happy to get this information. The easy answer to your question is that no, none of these positions would replace current work that we do with. It's not the position in question is a new project manager because of the additional funds that we did get through ISAC and the half-penny sales tax. Plus, this position is a half funded out of USDA funds for kitchen repairs. There's just so much work that's being done that we need additional project managers. So in fact, what it's doing is making sure that we have the capacity in-house to oversee the work that is being done by our professional contractors in our schools. So it's not replacing somebody who would get additional work.
But I think the request to just get information to the Construction Advisory Committee, we certainly
could have that available for their January meeting.
Well, and the reason why is because they kind of know a lot of people and that, that might be looking for a job or looking for this kind of job work, you know what I'm saying? Because it's not actually, they're not actually having to, work at a construction site, but they have the knowledge and background that would support someone that we might hire. So they might be a really great candidates that we might, it's just getting the word out there. So
yes.
I don't know how we do that, but I want to make sure that they're included with that.
We certainly can do that, and we have been, in preparation for these positions, we have started to let our partners know that these positions may be coming available, and please give us ideas on where the job market is very tight.
Right, exactly.
so especially in the development industry. We have been working with them, and we can certainly get out an email or a memo to them in the next week once we get these positions approved, that the positions have been posted. And if you have ideas of people, please send them our way. So yes, absolutely, on recruiting, we should absolutely use our partners to help us identify good talent.
So just to make sure, so a memo to them once it's approved about the positions. And then follow up at the January Construction Advisory Committee meeting.
That's what I'm hearing is being asked, is that we would.
I think so. I think it's just involvement and, having the, I don't know, yeah, yes.
Our partners.
To have some input.
Yes, absolutely. We will do both. We will get as soon as the positions have been approved, we will get a memo or an email to them, asking them, letting them know the positions have been approved and soliciting ideas, and then following up at the January CAC.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, ladies.
Good.
Just one question that, just in case.
Yes.
A board member asked, and I thought we could answer at least part of it, and then the rest of it, Dr. Spiro could follow up. The last board meeting, we did approve Assistant Principal Success Academy, which is
The Prevention Center Assistant Principal.
Assistant Principal, so that
She
came.
started Monday.
And part of Dr. Spiro's vision there is about the creation of a credit retrieval high school. So it's more than just a Prevention Center Success Academy assistant principal, but it also hopes to grow into really this dream.
A credit retrieval high school.
Credit retrieval high school. So that is.
And we're still running around 17 students. It's fluid.
Right.
And we are looking to hire a new paraprofessional, as we shared. Unfortunately, the one that was there passed away. So we're replacing that para position, and then we have currently the teacher that is there. So that's the current status.
Yeah.
Any other?
And so that's, I think, the best, the two of us can probably answer that question, and then Dr. Spiro and his staff could probably.
He indicated to me that there was a really good meeting that Mr. Simmons and some other folks had with the Hanley Foundation, Hanley Group, and that in the board update, you'll be receiving some additional information. He'll have that for tomorrow. Okay? Thank you.
All right, time-wise, we're moving on along. Nothing under operations? Anyone? And then there's public hearings. I just have a question about N3, and it says on our list, plan for student enrollment, the draft is of plan for student enrollment board. So two questions. One, is this what we'll be voting on Tuesday? Is just that this approving this draft? Are we approving a board, and how would the board be select? Is there at some point we talked about a committee or a group or something dealing with that, right? And I didn't see it on there as to how that would be selected. And if you need to get back later, we can.
Well, I actually have a possible not a possible, have a very probable update regarding the plan for student enrollment. This is the plan that the PLC, and that's the group that actually works on this plan. They made recommendations, and they had, we had a recent board briefing on this where Soretta came and talked about the changes in the plan. So that's what you would be voting on. However, remember, as a part of the Big 5 goals, proximity-based student assignment was something that I'm really pushing for, and our team has really started to go to work on this and has some potential recommendations that could make some changes to this plan. And if those do go forward, I may end up pulling this and bringing it right back at the following meeting, and that's something that I plan to discuss with each board member at the one-on-one meeting, and I'm going to be meeting with impacted principals tomorrow. any principal that may have a potential impact in terms of the current plan as it's laid out. So just to give all board members an idea as to what we're talking about, we're looking at things like we have situations where the way the plan normally works is you have where students are, if they are living in a particular subzone, you have the opportunity to go to any school within that subzone and any contiguous subzone. However, there are situations where they have an opportunity to go to every school within the zone. So every school in the east zone, every school in the south zone. That creates some transportation difficulties and increases costs and ride time. And so I've asked for, let's look at some sensible transportation conduits and look at, so we're literally, the team is literally going student by student. So if we had any impact here, they would be calling every single parent involved in such a change, and before we made anything, that would be, something that we would not want to negatively impact a family. So this is a pretty big ask that I've made of the team, and again, I want to get input from principals prior to implementing any such change. We're going to be doing that, and then also discussing the specifics with each and every board member at your one-on-one meetings. And then again, if we do make changes, then I will I'll either pull this and bring back a revised edition, or bring back an amendment. So one of the two, but I want time to work through this. And again, this is one of the big goals, and I just wanted, hey, I want some progress this year. Like, we can make some progress this year. Some simple things that could save costs, and so the team took me up on that challenge, and so this is the work of that.
Okay.
Quite an undertaking, though.
Yeah.
It is. Thank you for that. Are there any other questions, discussions around the agenda? If not, we are at a point, can we take a 5-minute break, come back and give Academic Services Envision 2030 Strategic Plan time to set up, and then we will move on. Thank you. Now we're on. Thank you and welcome back. Thursday, November 14th workshop. And we are now going to hear from Academic Services about Envision 2030 and strategic plan. And we're going to hear about this wonderful group that's come to join us. We're excited because there's usually not that many people in the audience. But thank you so much for coming, and we'll hear all about you.
Good morning. Good morning. And we're very excited to have with us another team from Academic Services this morning as we continue to go through our 5 long-term objectives. Today we'll be talking about Objective 2, which is increased kindergarten readiness, and Objective 3, which is increased college and career readiness. Both of those are part of the big 5 goals that the superintendent talked with you about at our last board meeting, and so we'll connect those a little bit after we hear what's going on with the strategic plan goals that are related to here. So this morning I have with me Jeannie LaFountain, who's our Director of Early Childhood and Title I and something else, and migrant, and a whole line of names that we're getting a little nervous about as her retirement comes too close. And Shelley Taylor, who works with our students on graduation rate and multiple other things. And Rita Davis, who is our director of our ACE Adult and Career Education Group. So we'll hear from all of those today, but we're going to start out with Ms. LaFountain, and she's going to talk to you about Objective 2 and what's going on with increasing kindergarten readiness.
So my favorite topic, and a very hot topic right now, there is lots of talk about pre-K and kindergarten readiness, so I couldn't be happier about that. Today, though, I am here to talk to you about Objective 2, and the first goal under that is to increase the percentage of pre-K students identified as prepared for kindergarten. So currently, the way that is assessed is using the early STAR that's administered within the first 30 days of kindergarten, and so it was administered this year. We will not have the results, so until probably February. It takes the state a while to get those back to us. But in an effort to meet this goal, of course, in district programs, we're working to align the assessment to support classrooms, but this is really about all incoming kindergartners, and our district programs only serve about 10% of those kids, give or take. So what we need to do is increase the capacity in our community, at our community providers. So one of the ways that we did that is about 4 or 5 years ago, we established the Pre-K to 3 alignment work group. And I'm pleased to say that the membership of that group has increased tremendously. So not only now do we have district staff, district early childhood staff, but we also have community pre-K providers. We have the coalition representatives, and we have FGCU and FSW, as well as the future makers. So it's become a pretty active work group. Some of the things that have come out of that work group is we've developed the kindergarten screener. We have developed a guide to kindergarten brochure. And you probably remember the Preferred Pre-K Provider Program, where where we recognize providers in our community that meet specific criteria. And then most recently, we're working on the Principal and Community Provider Forums, and we're working to finalize a professional development pathway for our preferred pre-K providers. And all of this is to help our community understand what the needs are in terms of when children come to school so that they are ready for kindergarten. We also want kindergarten to be ready for them. So the second...
Mostly.
Yeah. So the other thing, the next goal is that we increase the percentage of student growth on the VPK assessment to exceed 80%. The VPK assessment is the state-required assessment. That is, it's required twice per year. This year, in an effort to help meet the goal in our district programs, we're going to be doing that. We're going to be doing that assessment 3 times per year. So we're going to also do it in the middle of the year. But we're providing training for our teachers. We have Classroom Connections, which meet 4 times a year, that is based on what the teachers identify as their needs for supporting their classrooms. We also have additional support, resource teachers, paraprofessionals, coaches that go into the classrooms to work with the teachers to help meet that goal. We also, in our program, we do home visits, and parent conferences, again, 4 times a year, and we share information regarding student progress so that we can get support from the home. And then the other thing is that, again, sort of like the pre-K alignment group, we're all about making transitions easier from pre-K into kindergarten. And so one of the other things that we do to align ourselves is we also, in pre-K, we have curriculum maps and we have instructional guides. And so we're, just like everyone else in the K-12 world, we're looking at those maps, we're looking at those guides and revising them to meet the needs and to help our students make improved progress each year. So the next slide that you'll see is just to show you the end of the year for 2018-19. If these are just 3 of the categories that we look at, but you can see that we had that percentage of students, what's reflected there, meeting the kindergarten readiness goal. If you look at 2019-20, that is the first quarter, that's the initial screening. So if you look, and that's pretty typical of every year when we look at years past, you can see, so for instance in mathematics, this year we have 4% of students that meet the criteria for that goal. By the end of the year, we had 79%, and that's typical every year, and so we anticipate making that same goal this year. So the next one is, just like the district, we look at the ABCs, and attendance is, we feel like attendance is a readiness goal. It's not all about ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, that really families and children need to know that attendance is important. And so we need to start establishing those habits in pre-K. And we do that. It's a focus for our social services team, which is made up of family advocates and social workers, in addition to teachers and administrators. But some of the things that we do is teachers send a message through School Messenger within an hour if a child is absent, and then they follow up with a phone call. We also have IDT meetings, which are interdisciplinary team meetings, where the educators, the social workers, the nurses, everyone gets together for each and every classroom and goes over each and every student to look at the ABCs. And then we also have an attendance team for those schools that are not the early childhood center. There's a school administrator on the team, a Head Start administrator, a curriculum specialist, a nurse, and parent to look at how can we improve attendance. And if you look, our target for FY20 is 25%, and for quarter 1 we were already at 27%. So we anticipate keeping up with that for this year. The next goal is to increase the number of elementary schools participating in the principal provider forums. This is a pretty exciting project for us. Again, this came out of the pre-K to 3 work group. And what are the principal provider forums? And what they are is where principals, where we have invited, and it's taken about 3 years for us to really try to get this process to one that really works. We've tried several things, and we keep revising and tweaking to make it better. But what happens is we really want to build ongoing relationships with our community providers. And so what we have done is invited them into schools that are willing, and they come to the school and they meet with the administration and the kindergarten team. They talk about similarities and they talk about differences in versus pre-K, what's going on at the centers and what's going on in the kindergarten classroom. And it's been pretty exciting because several things have come out of that. We've debunked some myths, because a lot of our providers were just, when you get to kindergarten, all they do is worksheets, worksheets, worksheets. And we've been able to show that that is in fact not the case. One of the first ones that to me is a prime example of how this is working is we had some discussions about, I asked the question, so in kindergarten, what do you really focus on in the first quarter? And the kindergarten teacher said phonemic awareness. And I said, perfect. That's what we spend all of pre-K doing. And so the pre-K providers were able to talk about that. Then the kindergarten teachers talked about how they peel back the sound. That's some of the language that they use. Pre-K providers don't use that curriculum. That's a part of the curriculum that we have. So the pre-K providers then became clear on, okay, if we talk about peeling back the sound, which is the same thing they were doing, it's just using the same verbiage, that would smooth the transition into pre-K. So that has been really exciting. We also have the children visiting the school that they're going to go to. The kindergarten teachers are mentoring and working with the pre-K providers. And then there's also been some visits back and forth. The pre-K providers come to kindergarten at the beginning of the year so they can see this is where our kids are going. This is what it looks like. How can we make it look a little more like kindergarten at the end of pre-K? And then the kindergarten teachers are also visiting the pre-K providers and saying, this is what it looks like at the end of pre-K, and how can I help transition kids into my pre-K class? So it's really a lot about ongoing relationships. We don't want this to be a one-time visit or a one-time meeting. We want these to be relationships where at one school they've even shared at the end of the year, they met with the pre-K providers and received information about their incoming students. So, you know, Shelley shouldn't be with Rita because they don't behave in classroom. And so, you know, and we know that about them. You know, but, you know, Shelley may need a certain kind of teacher where, you know, who may be very structured, where Rita needs somebody who provides a little more options. And so those are some things that have come out of these that I think are just really exciting. You need to know that Angela Nader from Orangewood and Nicole Osterholm from Cape Elementary have really taken the lead on this and have really worked with our community to develop a process that we're getting ready to roll out to even more principals. So we are up to finalizing the process, which includes, the process does include facilitators. So we're identifying facilitators that can, that will serve for us, but we decided we really need to provide a training to make sure that we're hitting the points that we want to make. So that's coming up next. And then as these go along, we'll continue to collect best practices so that we continue to improve the process to make it a real meaningful activity rather than just something that we just do. And then the last thing is raising funds. The last goal is about raising funds for pre-K expansion. We're making good progress on this because we have established a pre-K expansion committee with district staff where we're looking at possible ways that we can expand over the next 10 years. You know, I know the superintendent has said 200 kids per year. So that's, you know, we're working with a team because, again, we need to identify space. We need to determine how we're going to get personnel, all of those things. So we're looking right now at James Stevens. There's room there. So we're talking about trying to do something there as soon as August, hopefully, as well as looking at expansion at existing schools. And then this goal to raise the funds, we're working with Kaylee and Community Relations and as well as the Grants Department. And the $50,000, just if you wonder, that's what it takes to set up one classroom. That's, you know, to equip one pre-K classroom. So that's kind of where the $50,000 came from. So just in closing, you know, we know that kindergarten readiness is important. And, but equally as important is how we assess readiness. And so we want to make sure that as the discussion moves forward, that we keep in mind how it is assessed, how we determine what readiness is, and that remembering that these are young children, and sometimes I worry that we forget that. These are young children with a great capacity for learning, so we need to really continue to focus on quality as well as making sure that we look at developmentally appropriate practice and make sure we're incorporating that as we move forward. That's it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And as Jeannie mentioned, this is one of the big 5 goals. By 2030, the goal is to have 2/3 of our kindergarten students having attended some type of a district-affiliated program, pre-K program. And our short-term goal is by the end of FY21 to have a minimum of 200 additional students. And as you saw up there, the James Stevens facility is the one that we're looking at first, as we're looking at renovation possibilities there and the capital improvement program. We also have a possibility of a community grant, which might be able to provide some spaces as we work around that. And so right now, there's a lot of planning involved in where do we possibly have space, existing space, where do we need to possibly renovate to add space, and then as we look at building new schools, where does this fit in? So it's a really big project, but as we get our children into kindergarten, this is the best chance they have for being prepared, as if they can be in a very high-quality program. Dr. Atkins, did you want to address anything there?
Well, it's just like we had talked about with the team relative to the proximity goal. We gave this challenge, and our folks went to work on it, and they put forth really, again, a pretty aggressive goal, but a good goal, because by opening this up to 2/3 of the students in Lee County, I think that we can give many of our students an opportunity they wouldn't otherwise have. Our goal was to eliminate some of the challenges that parents have to high-quality pre-K, for those that may not have the means, and the end also help to reduce achievement gaps, because the achievement gap starts as students are entering into kindergarten with significant gaps, but if we're able to provide quality pre-K programs for them to be able to access, we can certainly bridge that gap, and I think get all of our kids in Lee County started off on the right foot.
Are there questions? Yes.
Those tests that are administered super early in the beginning of the kindergarten year, you showed those numbers like 4% to 79% for math. Are those administered on a computer?
The ones that I showed you, the 4% up, those are not, that's in the pre-K year. The first one that we talked about, the early STAR, is the one that's administered during the first 30 days of kindergarten. And yes, that is done on a computer.
And that's required by the state? That is as crazy as anything I have ever heard.
Right.
And I am all about no paper,
Yeah.
but I don't know how a kid figures out how to maneuver a computer that early in
It
their
definitely
education.
puts our children at a disadvantage. It really does.
Dr. Savage, we're going to have to get together and share a brain and figure out how to fix that. Please and thank you.
I will add to that. When I worked at James Stevens with Dr. Savage, and I was over the computer labs, and you just don't even understand a room of 28, and I think I had kindergarten at the time, and they come in with the little badges on with their name and their number, and one kid didn't have his, and so I said, okay, so what's his name? The next kid, I don't know. Nobody knew who the kid was. So I said to him, when your mama calls you in to eat dinner, what does she call you? He says, come and eat. so I gave up on that one. But that really is an issue. And some of them that don't have computer access at all, they just sit there and they just look at it.
Well, and really, they almost don't have the motor skills to operate the mouse, which is what they have to do. I mean, again, which is what I talked about, being developmentally appropriate. And that's in that one assessment, that one moment in time, it's a screener. Really, it's not the most appropriate.
Right. I knew he had to weigh in on this piece.
So, yeah.
Come on down.
Yeah.
To clarify certainly it's a very passionate area for me as well. There are certainly some national best practices around assessment for our children, and we, one of the ones that Jeannie's very familiar with, Teaching Strategies Gold, has a much more authentic assessment practice, but the challenge with this and the Star Early Lit is that it's statewide, and so while there certainly are plenty of arguments that it's inappropriate, that you're not necessarily testing what the students know, but sometimes it's issued by having them not be able to engage with the technology to get at what they actually know, that standard is still being applied statewide. And so from that standpoint, while we might have concerns, so too would everyone else, but we're still accountable for the ultimate results that we have statewide until better strategies. Fortunately, Bethany Quisenberry is not here today, but she's one who was one of the members on the group that actually looked at some of the assessment practices to try to get at, so vital to understand that information about readiness, but what's the best way to do it. So I just wanted to kind of validate, and I know the state is aware of certain pieces, but they were looking for something that could be kind of standardized across in a way that was.
Over the years, I mean, every 2 to 3 years they change it, because really assessing young children is at a moment in time, like you do a 5th grader or a 10th grader, and it really doesn't tell the readiness. And so it's a challenge, because again, we want to be accountable in the early childhood world, but determining how best to do that has been a challenge for the state over the years.
So on the one hand, we are assessing students and recognizing the deficiencies inherent in those assessments, and on the other hand, we're building intervention systems and more programs based on the data coming out of those flawed tests.
Right, and I have to tell you, it's a pretty high stakes test, because they really are they look at, and this is community providers, so I'm speaking as much about community providers as our district programs, and that is, and the fact is that in Lee County, we're one of the lowest, Dr. Savage has found that, and it's true that we are, but the thing is that they will start, well, what Dr. Spiro said yesterday is they're talking about sanctioning programs, and so that means money. So programs that are getting VPK dollars, if they don't meet some certain threshold, based on the early star right now is what it is, they may, there may be sanctions against those programs, which is going to make, having pre-K in our community even more difficult to attain, because that's where, that pays for half of the day.
Specifically from an access standpoint, because if what you don't necessarily want is programs denying students who are coming with a lower readiness level. Again, that goes back to the assessment practice. When you're talking such as gold, it's developmental. So instead of it being a simple criteria that they have to make, it really kind of honors the child. They're not just looking at the literacy, they're really looking at the entire child holistically in various domains. Cognitively, psychomotor standpoint, they're just looking at everything, because all of those things matter. And so it's a real opportunity as a state to elevate, to be a leader. Some of the highest, New York City's really taking the lead, Seattle, the state of Washington. Folks where there was a higher level of education and whatnot, they've really pursued this, understanding the benefit as we move from a commerce standpoint as we evolve. And so it would be wonderful to see Florida in engagement in this respect. We have such an interest.
The other thing about Teaching Strategies Gold that Dr. you've learned so much.
I know. Appreciate it.
So, but Teaching Strategies Gold looks at a range, so it's not necessarily a moment in time. So if you think about an infant who is learning to walk, they can walk from 9 months to 13 months, and still they're not considered behind. And so with the whole early childhood development, it's not like at the end of 10th grade, you need to be able to pass algebra or whatever, and have certain skills. These skills, developmentally, they develop at different rates, just like walking, just like talking, reading, recognizing letters, all those things come at different times. Some come very early and some are a little bit later, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're behind. However, we do have most of our children who enter, of course, we serve high poverty populations, but most of our children who come in, when they come into us at 4 years old, they're functioning language-wise on sometimes a 1.5 to 2.5-year-old level. So there's already a gap even way before they get to kindergarten, which is what makes this so important.
You had a comment?
Well, just that despite the challenges that we have with the assessments that are provided, I think that the important thing here is that the goal itself, to get to the big number of 2/3 in terms of that fraction of our population, is still critically important, because we know that there's substantial portions of our population that really need quality pre-K education, and we really have to, I think, be the leaders in this, in our community and even the state, to get out ahead of this one and do what's right for kids.
And quality
Ms. Patrica
is really what the key.
You had a quick comment, and we need to move on.
Oh, it's a question. Pre-K, is it VPK or Head Start that has the huge waiting list? In excess of 1,000 students-ish.
Well, we don't have really 1,000 anymore, but it's Head Start. And Head Start, it's because Head Start provides us with a funding, an amount of funding, and then we're approved for that amount of funding, and then we basically say to them, using this money, we can serve a certain number of kids.
So that's what the limitation is, the amount of funding.
Yeah, the VPK, that's only the 3-hour-a-day program. And so that's the one that you can get, every time you get a child, you can just access those dollars.
Okay.
But Head Start is really limited.
Great, thank you.
And
Ms. Fisher, I
Mrs. Fi-
apologize,
you
I
saw
hadn't
her.
seen you.
I was just going to say, I know Ms. Fisher had a question.
Yes, so as soon as you said the early star and talked about the fact that it's administered in August and we don't get the results till February, so then what really is the value of that assessment? So, okay, and so I'm just wanted to make a point, and the point is, we're doing something that for most of those kids is a developmentally inappropriate thing when you look at fine motor skills and their ages and their experiences, even with a mouse. So, but in spite of that, in spite of the fact that we have those low scores, which may or may not take money away from us in the near future, what happens by the time the results come, you're going to see amazing growth with those kids because we continue to do the interventions that need to be done for those kids. So I wanted to make that point, that what we're doing in the meantime, in spite of what the state is requiring, is the real work. And so, someone asked me something about what have I learned since I've been on the board, and I said, sadly, I've learned about follow the money. And so when that's more important than the results and the development of the kids, and I'm not saying that, but it's not important to us. What's important to us is that we are able to give those kids the start that they need. So I just wanted to make that point and thank, all of our staff and workers, not only in this county, but other counties who are doing that in spite of the misunderstanding, I think, on the part of some of the state legislators. And so how we really need to advocate for better decision-making at that point. And, then I'm looking forward ahead, and as we have the FSA in the third grade, that mandatory retention thing, what has that done to some of our kids? Because when you made the point about everyone's different and the growth, in getting teeth and walking and talking and recognizing shapes and letters is a variety that is individual differences. So what one kid may be ready to do at 2, another one may not be ready till 5, but eventually they get where they're going to go. So I think that, when we've had the fallout and I don't want to call them victims, but of that third grade retention, who really probably were doing what they needed to do in their own good time. So that when we're expecting kids to all do the same thing at the same time in the same way, regardless of their age in months, in early on, that makes a big difference, and then their experiences. So I just think that, kudos to our teachers and our providers for doing the work they're doing, and I'm real excited about what Angela and Nicole are doing, because I think that is going to be a really good model for a good practice.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to move on and skip a few years here and and talk about what happens when they get into high school. And we're going to turn it over to Shelley to talk about graduation rate.
Awesome. Okay, so we put everything on one slide, so I'm just going to go through these items, but I would like to start off with some really good data. I wasn't able to put it in here because it just came out from DOE, and it's in regards to our students with disabilities population. It is not cohort data, and by that I mean that when we are looking at our graduation rate, it is based on the 4-year timeliness within the cohort. But DOE just released that our standard diploma rate for students with disabilities has increased 2%. And again, that's not cohort, that's of all students with disabilities that earned a standard diploma within the year. So that's an increase of 2%, which is wonderful. That also captures those students who may stay until they're 22. And so it's again, offering opportunities beyond the cohort, but students are still being successful in getting that standard diploma. And the other thing in regards to our students with disabilities is our dropout rate decreased by 3%, and we are under the state's target in regards to our students with disabilities. Again, that's not cohort data, that's any student with a disability that dropped out between the ages of 14 and 22. And even though we think of dropouts are that voluntary termination at age 16, we do have students that fall under that category because they are whereabouts unknown or they ended up not enrolling in school. And that data actually, of the largest districts, which were grouped into 13, we are the next to the highest that improved in our student with disability dropout data. So it's super exciting. I'm really excited.
Good work.
Yes, that really speaks to the interventions within the schools and just the additional level of accountability and fidelity with what we're doing. So we're going to continue that work. So in regards to the first item with progress monitoring, we are continuing to use the early warning system. And the way that we talk about that is kind of like the lights on your dashboard. This is the way that we explain it to parents when we're in the community, that you're driving along and you might have some lights that come on the dashboard. It doesn't mean the engine's going to blow up. It just means we need to offer some attention to some certain areas. And so we're going to continue to use that early warning system in regards to attendance, behavior, and classroom success. And then also, I mentioned the district graduation tracker. We do have a grad tracker that is housed actually in Old Castle with the early warning system, but then we also have a district grad tracker, which our student services team uses, and that gives us district-wide data and allows us to really look at progress monitoring across GPA credits, assessments, and also includes inactive students. So we cannot forget those students that are affecting the cohort that might have dropped out 3 or 4 years ago. And turnover in school, it's very easy to forget those students. So we have to continue to look at that. The second item is utilizing some grant funding to complete mentor training. This is through the State Personnel Development Grant at FGCU and offers us the opportunity to provide Check and Connect, which is a formalized mentoring program, and then the strategic instruction model. And under the strategic instruction model, one thing that you might be very familiar with is learning strategies. So the SIM approach is really the foundational piece. It was the curriculum that was built to support learning strategies courses. And so we're excited that Fort Myers High School has wanted to introduce SIM to their in order to gain some proficiency and really actually look at the learning gains of their L2-5. And then, of course, we continue to work with Destination Graduation under that mentoring umbrella as well. I'm excited that it was already mentioned, the development of the high school credit recovery program. So that is a structure that we have a district team that has really been working and looking at what the profile of the student would be. And we recognize that research says 9th grade is an optimal time to intervene. And so we are looking at offering that program to students that are in 9th grade that are FSA level 2, right on the bubble. Also for those students who have quarterly course failures. So we're already identifying who those students are, and we will be taking a presentation to Cabinet next week. Okay. The next item is working with high schools with the ELL graduation task force initiatives. This came out of our grad data from last year, where really a big concern of ours is because we have a 30-point difference in our ELL versus non-ELL graduation rate. And so Carla Heck and I, through the ESOL department, have been working with schools and looking at best practices. And some of the highlights that have come out of that are schools are holding their own ESOL parent nights, and we are talking about graduation requirements. We are translating all of that. We've also increased attendance at the Advanced Institutes for ESOL paras, and increased attendance at the SIOP training, and then utilizing some additional ESOL funding for school tutoring. So just to highlight a few of those. The next thing is super exciting, the development of the value of a high school diploma brochure for students. And actually, this is a partnership with Rita, but legislation kind of prompted us in this area, but we were already excited to get some type of communication tool into the hands of our students that really talked about the value of the diploma. And so we built this based on research, and it talks about the earning potential, which is more than $9,000 a year. When you have a standard diploma. It also provides information on the student's value to the community. And a lot of people do not realize, but every student that has a standard diploma is a $500,000 value to their community. And that's based on the higher income, the increased spending, the increased taxes, sales tax, car sales, home sales, greater jobs, and overall economic growth, and new jobs and healthcare cost savings to the state. So also within that brochure, we talk about how you have the ability for stronger relationships and positive influence, and then 6 to 9 years longevity. So believe it or not, students with a standard diploma live longer. So again, this is a partnership with CTE, and we will be advising all students in the high school that have a 2.0 GPA or below in that value of a standard diploma, but then also what CTE courses are available on their high school campus. So trying to make the alignment there. The next item is refining the point of exit and the adult ed processes. What we are finding is that that point of exit, when a student actually terminates school enrollment, is it's too late. So what we are doing is building in some processes where teams will be looking at which early warning indicators the student is exhibiting, what interventions were in place, ensuring that the principal and the school administration is aware that that student is wanting to drop out. And then we look at, okay, what could the student success plan look like prior to just allowing the student to drop out. And then in regards to our adult ed processes, what we realized was we only had about 10% connection. So a withdrawal from the K-12 program and an enrollment is a W-26 code. And so when students are advised in the school to go to adult ed, only 10% of the students that we are advising to go to adult ed were ever connecting. So we worked with adult ed, and we created an enhanced process where schools are now completing an adult education referral form through a Google form, and then that information is automatically going into adult ed for constant contact, and so we are not disconnecting students. So we're excited to see what the outcome of that is. And then we had the opportunity to attend the National Dropout Prevention Conference. Very thankful to Dr. Martin and her staff for allowing us to participate and use some title funds. But we were so excited because Early Childhood went with us to the National Dropout Prevention Conference. And through that conference, we were introduced and really dove into the 15 effective strategies for dropout prevention. And we have been able to share those strategies with our academic cabinet and then, Academic Services Division, and also most recently with our APCs for the middle and the high school, and then even involving them in some active learning and self-reflecting on what their role is specifically in regards to those 15 different effective strategies.
So I just wanted to just make sure everybody was mindful of time. We're kind of bumping up against a time constraint.
I'm going to go really fast. Okay. So we're working with our charter department with dropout prevention focus, and then also, the last couple will go pretty fast. Continue with our internet connectivity with our partnership with Sprint, and continuing to share information at our ESOL parent institutes and community forums. And then lastly, just continuing to really facilitate the conversation around chronic absenteeism and the impact that it has on lost instructional time with our principals, assistant principals, and even our parent involvement specialists.
Great, thank you.
Fast, but we'll leave time. It's so exciting, and so I can talk about it forever. I love it. So,
really great work. So.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very honored to be in this role. A lot of districts do not see the value in this focus role per se, and will really rely on multiple, staff members. But I think that there's great opportunity when you can collaborate across departments and really look at what is the impact of what all we're doing in regards to dropout and graduation. So, thank you.
The ultimate articulation.
Yes, there you go.
Thank you.
All right.
And read it.
All right, good morning. As we continue with Objective 3, which is increase college and career readiness, I am fortunate to have impact on goals 2 through 5. So I appreciate brevity, so I will talk to you about just some key points of goals 2 through 5. Goal 2 is increase the number of enrollments in career-themed courses, so that's the first row in the chart on the screen. And career-themed courses are different from regular CTE courses in that they're CTE courses that offer an industry certification. So we go through a registration process every year with the state. There's also some other requirements to make it a career-themed course. But the reason why we urge this, increasing this at our middle and high schools, is because we know the value of these industry certifications. So that's one of our initiatives, is to make sure we're not only increasing the offerings, but the enrollments, that the students want to participate. How do we do that? We look at workforce needs. So there's hundreds of different industry certs that we could tie to all of the CTE courses, but we want to look at what does regionally, statewide, nationally, what are the occupational demands. We take a look at what other districts are doing, especially the Big Ten. We learned some things about some industry certs that we could take advantage of that we're not capitalizing on, and then also areas that we're doing very, very well in. Across the board, we have a very high pass rate. So we're proud of that once our students go into this process, that they are being very successful in achieving that industry cert. And then, of course, we're always increasing marketing and awareness of these courses, because we want our students as young as elementary school to be aware of what's possible in middle and high school. So the second goal, increase the percentage of students graduating with at least one industry certification, ties very well into increasing the number of courses that offer industry certs. So once we get them aware and get them enrolled, now we want them to successfully achieve. And for folks who are not aware, an industry cert is not a district written test or a teacher written test. Right. These are third-party vendors who are saying that you have the skills, the credentials that meet their standards. So we're very proud of our pass rate, and the goal is not only is our students leaving with a high school diploma, but they're leaving with an industry certification that will either prepare them to go directly into the workforce, maybe chop off some college credits, save some money that way if they're going straight into college. So it is a high value. A data snapshot on the first row, I wanted to say we have over 39,000 enrollments right now in our career-themed courses, so we've already met our FY20 target. So we're proud of that. And then as of October 30th, 2019, 36% of our grade 12 students have earned at least one industry cert. Our target for this year is 50%. So That is goals 2 and 3. On to goals 4 and 5. Goal 4 is also career and tech ed. And we're looking at the number of businesses and community partners involved in career and technical education programs and initiatives will increase by at least 200%. I was listening to the board briefing a few months ago when Cindy shared that the number was 4, and there was a collective gasp of like, you mean there's only 4? But really, the intention here is not individual school interactions, which we have almost 1,000, I think, of those. Are just tremendous, and we're so grateful for that. But really, who are our partners that are making a district-wide impact in CTE? And how we're going to achieve that is actually to implement a systematic structure of a career advisory board at each of the high schools, so that it will be district-wide, but we'll be able to keep that personal touch at each high school level, so they can connect with their business partners, but also help us to have a standardized process for evaluating our academies for effectiveness and whether or not they have value to the workforce. So we're very excited about that. And we're grateful in this data snapshot. I want to talk about our ongoing partnership with Lee BIA, the Lee Building Industry Association. We really appreciated everyone who came out to Build My Future in October. We had over 600 students there. A tremendous undertaking that is not possible without Lee BIA. So that is the power of partnerships. And then also, a little bit lesser known, but still just as impactful, Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association event, second year, our Taco Bout It that we had at the Burroughs home. We had over 300 attendees, and that was up from last year. And what's great is our students are taking the skills from the classroom and they're applying them at these competitions. And then the community organizations are gaining sponsorships to bring dollars back into the classroom to sustain the programs where our grant dollars are unable to meet the needs. So we're very excited about that. And then number 5, goal 5, is with the adult ed side of the house. So our GED and ESOL students. And we're very proud of this goal because right now we have over 2,200 adult students enrolled in our programs. And a lot of folks are not aware of that, but we're working very hard to make sure that English language learners, adult English language learners that have tremendous credentials from other countries become employable in our community, because that is truly an economic impact. So we're very passionate about helping those folks get the services they need and also to acquire the language skills. So our goal around that is not only do they come to our doors and enroll, but they stay with us. The magic number is 12 hours. That's where learning is activated and where we know that they will truly feel the learning gain process, and then where we can bring them through the semester of learning to have the post-testing to see where they've made the learning gains to progress to the next semester. So to help us achieve that, we've really standardized our processes. We have 8 physical adult education sites, and we also have online, and we're one of the fastest growing online adult ed programs in the state. And what we've tried to do is standardize the process of when an adult student enrolls, their pre-testing process, counseling, career pathways advisement, if they need connection to social services. Some of our students bring external challenges into the classroom, and so we try to help offset that. So our goal is to decrease the number of students who leave us before that magic 12 hour, and the target for this year is 5%. And then I wanted to speak about this slide. This is our insights. They asked us to talk about our insights for quarter 2. So we gave you our action steps, but what are insights for quarter 2? And it's objective 3, but I thought the more I reflected upon it, there's a lot of subjectivity in securing the objective. And I wanted to share that objectives, goals, action steps, and KPIs are critical to improving and in growing an organization, but they are not the only factor in moving the needle. The people behind the processes, compliance, and data measures are a critical factor in an organization's success formula. And when I pulled these pictures, and I'm so blessed to say that I have more than enough pictures to fill several slides, I thought about the people that were behind the smartphones taking these pictures. And some of those folks are here today, and I asked them to be here. This is adult ed and career and tech ed, because it is their dedication, perseverance, and giftedness that they bring to work every day that allow us to fill these slides, because without them, the slides would actually be blank. So as we continue to excel as a district into 2020 and 2030 and beyond, I would like to encourage all of us collectively and deliberately to consider how we support our team members, our peers, and our colleagues. And 2 questions I leave you with to reflect upon is, when is the last time you asked the folks you serve, what do you need from me, and how can I help you? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And again, this is strongly connected to the Big Five and the superintendent's goals. This one around expanding career and technical opportunities. And really, it's, can we get kids placed in a job if they choose not to go to college? And so the short-term one is that we would like to, by June of 2030, the total number of placements would increase by 10%, which brings us up to about 845 placements. And then by 2030, we really want to see a big increase of doubling the number of placements that we have coming out of our technical colleges to over 1,500. So we have, if you'll bear with me just a minute, I'd like to go ahead and give our board members opportunities to do a quick update, and then any questions you have around either one of those. Our first one, Mrs. Morgan, is our pre-K champion, so if you'd like to give us a quick update around that.
I have no update to provide.
Okay, then that's fine. As you heard earlier, we're still working on getting that in motion, so thank you. And Mrs. Jordan.
Okay, sure.
Talking about our business partnerships.
Yes. Well, I've been really busy out in the community and just speaking with different people to create that partnerships with the business in the district. And we are actually focused on Success Academy. And we've had this is our speaker series. We've had 2 guest speakers so far. The first one is Jonathan Martin. He's an attorney in town, and he grew up here. He went to school here. So he shared, his trials and tribulations of coming up in Lee County and what he went through and how he got to be where he's at today, which was really good. There was about 50 students there that day. Miss Carol Obermeyer, she's on the other side. She is from the Southwest Florida International Airport, and she actually did play professional basketball as well, so they loved it. So they're telling their stories of who they are and how they came to be who they are today, which is really interesting when the students are listening to this. So she works for the Port Authority, and she travels all over the world and to try to get different airlines to come into our community, because they have to base that on numbers of flights, how many flights are going to be able to, or leaving from here to Germany or here to Italy or wherever that may be. California right now they're working on. And actually the Star Wars plane had just flown into Southwest Regional that morning that they came out. So they did show the plane that came in. They took a picture of that, the inside and out. So that was quite interesting for the students as well. But we're just trying to, and we keep, sharing with them, and Jared and Crystal are part of this as well. And we try to do an activity with them, to make them have to converse with each other. And what their goal is to come up with the bios of each one of our speakers and have that out to the students ahead of time so that they can look at who they are and what they've done and come up with questions prior to them coming. And then that way they're prepared for the people who will be speaking. And we have guest speakers all the way through to December right now. So we're working on January getting them. And then afterwards, the goal is that they will send a thank you card, and I will be bringing them with me next time so that they sign them that day, because I think it's really important for them to, even though they're thanking them, I think it's important for them to send that thank you to them as appreciation. And so far it's been quite interesting, and just listening to the questions that they have. And the next week when we go there, they're going to be doing resumes as well, because Miss Carol had shared with them all the job openings and the site to go to. Some of them are 18 years old, so they're able to go to work there. And so we're going to help them do resumes to put out there, and how to dress and the whole 9 yards.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you. We certainly appreciate all of the work that the board members have been doing, raising awareness of the strategic plan, and so I appreciate that. Any questions that you have? I know we are really tight on time.
I just have one question, and I've asked it, I think, several years in a row. How do we get elementary kids and parents to choose the right middle school, given particularly in the career and tech area? How do we get them to make the right kinds of choices based on understanding what the opportunities are? And same thing with the middle schoolers. How do we get parents away from identifying a particular school because they know the school, as opposed to looking and actually hands-on seeing the activities and opportunities that are available to them? I know that in the past, the high schools have gone down and talked to the middle schools go down and talk to the elementary schools. Talking to kids is different than showing kids what they can put their hands on, so.
So we have a couple different initiatives that we're working on, because what we want to do is bring career exploration awareness down to as low as the elementary level. Obviously, we don't want our fifth graders picking their career, but we want them to be aware. One idea that's still in the incubation period is something called the Excel bus. So Excellent Career Exploration Lab, where we'll have a bus with different stations inside, and it's cost effective. We don't have to have it at every school, and it would go to the school. Fifth graders, when schools have their career days, fifth graders get on, experience the Excel bus, gets them started thinking about it. We have a brochure that we put out from the Career and Tech Ed department that shows all the opportunities at the middle and high school level. So anytime we speak at a community organization meeting, we distribute those to schools, so that would be something else that the student would receive. In the middle schools, it's been an effort over the last few years to bring more industry search down, especially to the 8th grade level. So now we do have more consistent, standardized opportunities that we can communicate to parents when choosing the middle schools, where before it was just a principal's interest. But at the middle school level, we actually wrote a position into the Perkins grant this year, and the new team member just recently started a career specialist. And her job is going to be to go to the middle schools and make sure that our students, they're working on a program called My Career Shines, which was part of House Bill 7071. So all students will have an interest by the time they leave middle school, a profile on My Career Shines, which is an interest and aptitude test for their skills. And as part of that, we will let them know what career academies would coincide with that throughout the district. And then another layer, we're going to bring a Career Academy interest survey during those meetings, so that they will, as part of the student enrollment process, it's not an application because we don't want to exclude any child from career and tech ed, but it shows an interest in a particular academy over another, which may help to elevate their opportunities as opposed to just a school they know, which is what you mentioned. So we have, now that we have that new team member, we have opportunities now to have more interactions at the middle school level.
Great, thank you.
Is that Kelly?
Oh, yes.
Is she here?
Kelly Thawley is our brand new career specialist for career and tech.
Her. I wondered why she was
Not
this
steal.
with this girl.
She came on her own free will.
Awesome.
Should I tell him Marshall that?
We're good at stealing. We really are.
We recognize talent.
Yes, Ms. Vaughn?
A couple things. First of all, I think in choosing the middle schools, we have to keep in mind that we're going for proximity schools, and I would say we need to have some consistency, but the career piece is very, very important so that we have those opportunities to explore. And it's interesting because last night we had a family dinner for a birthday, and my grandson is a 7th grader at Diplomat, and we actually had a discussion about choosing things, actually, it was more activities because he just started band, and now he's talking about football next year and all these things. And, the discussion went to middle school is a time to try out these things. And if you know middle school students at all, they're gonna have God knows how many different changes. And I think one thing that's important, I love what Ms. Jordan's doing, but I think to enhance that is, I'm going to use medical profession. kids will say, I want to be a doctor. And they're, you know, and maybe they'll have a change later on in terms of academic interest and proficiency. But let's face it, not everybody has, you know, it's not necessarily even the smarts, it's the grit to go through all of those things. So while we're talking about being a doctor or being an attorney, what if you're not a doctor? What are, you know, everybody knows doctor, nurse, but what are some of the other really important professions that pay a lot of money and you don't have to go to school for 8 years after high school? The same with in the legal field, all the different areas. So I think we need to remain very cognizant of keeping a consistency among our middle schools as we go toward proximity schools. And we also need to, it's wonderful for people to, for the kids to look for these highly professional positions with advanced degrees, but you know what? Some of these could actually even be stepping stones, I would imagine. Maybe somebody who does a lower level medical than a doctor, a nurse, a PA, or whatever, might then eventually use that as a stepping stone. So I think we need to keep all of those things in mind.
Ms.
Well,
Jordan?
I just wanted to, the speakers that will be coming, they're from all facets of life. I mean, trades,
Well, yeah,
everything.
yeah.
But, and I was wondering too, because I know we did the BIA trade show. To me, it's like a trade show. So why, I don't know if we have done that in the past, trade shows with, like you just said, with a bunch of different medical, hospitality, all of that, where kids have the opportunity to go. I know Fort Myers Middle has like a little trade show where people come in, different speakers from different facet of life, and they share with the kids so they can make a decision of high school. So I don't know if that's something that we've ever looked at, or
Our dream is to have, there's 17 career clusters from the Florida Department of Education. So our dream is to have a Lee BIA event for every career cluster. So that was architecture and construction. But what I'd like to reiterate is how powerful that community partnership was in putting that on. The amount of dollars they pay for our transportation for our students. So if we have that partnership, and we work very hard to have those partnerships, we would love to have a 17 career cluster trade show for each. Career days are based at the school level. That's a school-based decision, and we're hoping that that may be more systematic once we get these career advisory boards implemented, because we really need, as big as we are, 39,000 course enrollments in CTE, we really need to have a systematic process for implementing and running these boards. So I think that could help with that.
So how much involvement do our middle schools have now with the Learning for Life Career Explorer programs? Because I know they provide multiple opportunities and a lot of experience and exposure to those, both at hospitals with the Sheriff's Department, the fire departments. And I know that they're available and they're practically cost-free. So I don't know how much you're involved with that.
No, Learning for Life, which organization is that associated with?
It's actually state-funded as Learning for Life, but they are an affiliate of Boy Scouts of America, and they have Career Explorer programs available at all of our middle schools. Restaurant, hospitality.
Our focus from the district level has been implementing industry certification pathways.
Yeah,
Right, so these, we can definitely look into that. A lot of those programs tend to be a school-based decision. We haven't had a district-wide approach this year. My Career Shines is the district-wide approach for that. So we can definitely look into that.
Okay.
And in the past, that's been run through the Social Studies Department. So I'm guessing Matt Kay might have more information on that we could ask Matt about that.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you all so very much, and I think we should give a hand also to our audience from CT. Thank you all for coming. I hope you go back and say wonderful things that are happening. We appreciate, and welcome to.
Thank you all. We appreciate your allowing us to go a bit over
Yeah,
here.
that's okay. Okay, so looking at our time, we have on our agenda, the school board attorney model, consulting with the in-house staff and all that for 30 minutes. There's probably going to be several questions with that. My recommendation is that we move that to the afternoon. We can open up in the afternoon like we've done before and do this item.
And that proposal or presentation is actually being done by Mr. Williams.
Is that okay, Mr. Williams? If we can do that, and then that way that we're not, I mean, are you available?
Yeah, I'm available. Presenting on that issue will be me, Dr. Desamore, and Dr. Pruitt. So we're kind of going to do a overview
Okay,
of several
and
different
will
areas.
you all be available right after lunch at 1 o'clock?
Dr. Pruitt
Dr.
just said yes.
Desamore?
I don't know about Dr. Desamore.
Are you available at 1 o'clock? Sorry, we'll buy you lunch. What other bribery do? Okay, well, to give us time and we're not rushing everybody through it,
No worries.
if that's okay with everyone else, we will open up at 1, do that segment, and then move on to briefing.
And that will be an A and B.
That will be an A and B?
Yes.
We got to move out?
Yes, because do the right thing is here.
Ah, okay. All right. Okay, then we are adjourned until this afternoon at 1. Thank you.